Afghans have lost control over their country, and we need to help them regain control over their country.
Yeah, we have a very special guest, former diplomat for Canada, France, and for NATO, Mr. Omar Samad.
This country was not always at war with itself. It had a period of not only stability, but also prosperity to some extent, and also growth and reforms.
Afghanistan has beautiful places as well. We've heard about the hospitality, the people there. It's unfortunate that the media has depicted them completely differently.
Men and women were given the right to vote in 1964, something that didn't even exist in the Islamic world. Afghanistan falls into a civil war situation with no one really gaining upper hand until a new group emerges called the Taliban.
The common denominator has been somehow an Islamic State. So do you think this is more of a religious war that's taking place out there, or is it just a coincidence? What's your perspective on that?
I was involved in small-scale little underground activities against the communist government. Almost got me killed. Fortunately, some of my best friends disappeared. Family members disappeared.
Disappeared as in?
Disappeared. To this day, disappeared. They were unfortunately executed and killed. 9/11 is an important point of reference here because it involves Afghanistan, it involves America, it involves Al-Qaeda.
We have our thoughts about 9/11. We think Israel had a massive hand in that as well.
Al-Qaeda was made up of mostly Arabs and others from other parts of the Islamic world. Probably very few Afghans, or none, were part of it.
Understanding the history of Afghanistan, what really happened there and who the people are.
We need to debunk those false narratives. It's very important, and you guys are doing a great job.
Today is May 23rd. A lot of our guests that we pre-record with tend to air a week, possibly 2 weeks after pre-recording. And a lot goes on in that time span. So we have a very special guest, a former diplomat for Canada, for France, and for NATO, Mr. Omar Samad. We want to thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us.
Well, good morning to both of you. I'm very happy to be here on your podcast. Heard a lot about it, and I look forward to this friendly, open discussion.
Definitely. Well, a lot of people have a very big misconception about what's going on in the Middle East. And you, as a former ambassador for Afghanistan, a lot of people have depicted that country as a certain state or organization, which we want to kind of have you on to shed light on who the Afghan people are. Because we've had a lot of former guests who were veterans, who have served for this country. And we talk about living in one of the greatest countries in the world, but recently we've noticed that we've also been one of the most problematic countries in the world, alongside another country in the Middle East that's been somewhat problematic as well. But briefly, can you tell us how you got into politics before we dive into some current events?
Sure. Thank you so much. I think it's a very appropriate question to ask about a country that's far away, first of all. A country that is geographically situated between several other important countries. China on one hand, what used to be the Soviet Union in the north of Afghanistan now is 3 different independent republics: Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan. Then we have Pakistan in the southern eastern part of Afghanistan. Pakistan being a country that is 80-something years old. Prior to that was India. All of that was India. So Afghanistan's history goes back with a relationship with India, and India under the British rule for a long time. And then we have Iran, this country that is now in the headlines for a lot of reasons. So from that geographic perspective, you see that it's landlocked, no access to the sea, but has always been sort of considered as a crossroads for empires coming and going, rulers coming and going, different dynasties coming and going. And it has always also kept its own characteristics. It's made up of various, let's say, not just tribes, but ethnic groups, large ethnic groups in the millions. The Pashtuns being a large ethnic group, the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, the Hazaras, and many others. Almost 24 different ethnic groups speaking the same number of languages in Afghanistan. But the country has 2 main languages, official, per the constitution that we used to have. One is Pashto and the other one is Dari, which is similar to Farsi. So Dari in Farsi, we call it Dari. The Iranians call it Farsi. Some people nowadays call it Farsi Dari, Dari Farsi, depending on your likes and dislikes. But I think that at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that it shows that it's a country that's very connected to its neighborhood.
Yes.
And we can go into ancient times. I'm not going to bother you with that. But coming to more contemporary times, we realize that when the British came into India, as I mentioned earlier, 18th century, 19th century, they set up the East India Company, and then they were ruling basically over that land. It was a rich land. The British were very interested in being there and taking advantage of it. But then the Russians were sort of lurking from the other side. The Russians were also an empire at the time that was expanding, both expanding south and east and to some extent west. And so what happened is that this is when the Russian czars, prior to the communist takeover, were able to annex a lot of lands that belonged, some of it, to other people, the Caucasus, for example,
Yes.
Central Asia, today what makes Central Asia. So as they were advancing and the British were in India, they realized that in between there's this country called Afghanistan. So what do we do with this piece of land that is separating the two empires? And so the Russians stopped at a certain point, the British stopped at a certain point, even though the British tried on several occasions to occupy, let's say, or invade or have more control over Afghanistan. But it didn't really work out because the Afghans were always resisting any attempts by any foreigner to rule over that piece of land. And we're talking about 18th, 19th century.
Yes, yes.
Afghanistan at the time wasn't called Afghanistan, but it was made up of all these different entities. But they had a central ruler in Kabul mainly, initially in Kandahar, and they were able to sort of balance the power dynamics between the Russians and the British. And the British were able to control parts of Afghanistan's foreign policy, not domestic so much, because they were facing resistance. And the Russians also realized that they needed to accommodate the Afghans to some extent. And then there was Iran. And Iran was also facing the same dilemma. And so they were also sort of squeezed between the Russians, the British at the time, and some other powers like the French and others. But they had a harder time dealing with that balancing act. So, moving fast forward, we come to the 20th century when the Afghans eventually are able to regain their whole independence by 1919. One of the very first countries at the time that was fully independent, at the time when the world was sort of carved between major imperial powers. Mm-hmm. The Spanish, the Portuguese, the French, the Dutch, the British, of course, and a few others, but mainly those guys, and the Russians as well. So Afghanistan sort of became the symbol of resistance and independence movements in the so-called third world, the developing world. And it was able to have its own independent sort of foreign policy. All of that changed a little bit. We had internal issues in the country. And then we had a period of about 40-something years of stability. This is something many people don't know. They think Afghanistan was always at war.
This is after 1990.
So this is major chunk of the 20th century until the 1970s. And I'm trying to depict this for you because so people understand that this country was not always at war with itself or with others. It had a period of not only stability, but also prosperity to some extent, and also growth and reforms, political reforms, to the point where, and I know this because my own families were involved in all of this, in politics and diplomacy. One of my grandfathers was someone who wrote part of the Afghan constitution in 1964, who was part of that commission that changed Afghanistan from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy, meaning that the power did not rest in the hands of one family. That power was then distributed and allowed a parliament to be elected. Men and women were given the right to vote in 1964, something that many people do not know.
Yeah, very interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Something that didn't even exist in the Islamic world as much. It was very unique. So here you have a country poor, still underdeveloped, isolated, playing this game now between not the British and the Russians, because that was done with. The British were gone from India. The Soviet Union was controlling its borders. But this time it was the Cold War period, mostly. And it was the pre-World War II and post-World War II period, where Afghanistan then had to choose and play a game between the Americans, the new power, the global power, and the Soviet Union. Soviet Union being a neighbor and America being very far, not that much interested in Afghanistan. You know, it's interesting, in the 1950s, the Afghan government sent delegations to Washington saying, hey, are you interested in having a special relationship as you have with Iran at the time and as you have with the new sort of established Pakistan? Because India
Split,
was split and Pakistan was formed. And so the United States and most of the Western world were closer to those two countries and not as much with Afghanistan. And Afghanistan was sort of left unattended, let's say, didn't really know which way to go. And so first, we attempted to be closer to the Americans and to the new NATO that was being formed. But they, for whatever reasons at the time, the 1950s mainly, decided that we will leave it as is. We will not take sides with Afghanistan. And as a result, the Afghan government was left with no option but to turn to the Soviet Union. And the Soviets were very welcoming and said, absolutely, they opened their arms, come, we will be buddies and we will give you as much money as you want. We will help you form the military, Air Force and Army, and we will give you so many millions of dollars of credit to start projects. We will build roads. And then the Americans realized, oh, the Russians are gaining a foothold here. So let's do something too. So they started pumping some money inside Afghanistan as well, but not get involved in the military, on the military side, or heavily get involved, or get us over to join in alliance.
Did Afghanistan have any natural resources?
Afghanistan has always had a lot of natural resources, which is a very good question. But till this day, most of its natural resources, not all, but most of it are untapped. They're still underground. Something that we can discuss later on, because it's an issue that has come up on several occasions and I'm sure will be coming up in the future as well. So it wasn't really exploited at the time. So there was no rivalry over natural resources in Afghanistan because they all remained sort of mainly unused and unexploited. So as a result, in the 50s and 60s, we sort of drifted a bit in the middle, getting some aid from the Soviets, some aid from the Americans. But our military was mainly run or mainly funded by the Soviet Union, which created a problem, which meant that thousands of Afghans were sent to the Soviet Union for training. And that training wasn't just technical training. It also was ideological training. And many of them, not all, but many of them came back somewhat aligned with the Soviet thinking at the time. That sort of Marxist-Leninist, Soviet-type, Soviet-style ideology that was basically anti-West, what they called Western imperialism and all of that. So that was the Cold War period. And these two powers were clashing, whether it was in Cuba, whether it was in Eastern Europe. Afghanistan became sort of a battleground, but calm.
It's funny. It's funny. You mentioned something about them being a parliamentary system, going very diplomatic, and then as soon as the Soviets get involved, they begin to lean more towards communism.
Right. So this is a period when we are internally trying to be somewhat in the middle. and moderate and in charge of our own affairs. The Soviets are having influence mainly in the 60s and most of the 70s. The Soviet influence is through funding and military training and projects. They haven't yet come in and taken over, or they haven't yet operationalized their Afghan Communist Party cadres to take over. That happens in 1978. Before 1978, something more important happens. So as I told you, in 64, we have a new constitution, we have an elected parliament, we have a period of what they call the decade of democracy in Afghanistan, an experimentation that worked fairly well, but we did not pay enough attention to nurture it. And as a result, by 1973, one of our former monarch, the king's cousin, who was a bit displeased about how things were running and felt like he was sidelined, because now it was not an absolute monarchy, it was a constitutional monarchy. He, with the cooperation of some of these Soviet-trained elements, staged a coup, and he overthrew his cousin, the king, and the monarchy. And in 1973, we ended up with a republic, quote unquote, run by a former prince, right? Because he was a former prince and belonged to the royal family, which was an odd situation, but it was still stable. People knew him, people trusted him. There was no big reaction to this coup, but it was the first step towards more Sovietization.
I want to ask you this though, as far as the monarchy is concerned. So you have the parliamentary system, you have government officials, and then you have the monarchy itself. Was the monarchy running like how it was in Iran, like the Shah, or was it more of like like what they depicted today as like a extreme Islamic type of regime?
So it was neither one. So the monarchy that we had was not as powerful and as centralized and as dictatorial, let's say, as the Iranian model. And it was not as loose and disconnected as the UK model, where the British monarch is just a symbol, does not run government. The government is run by the prime minister, elected government in the UK. So we were something in between those two. The monarch had powers, important powers that was given to it by the constitution, but the parliament and the executive branch run by the prime minister also had a lot of powers to run the daily affairs of the country without the monarch stepping in every time. So it was something in between, which worked fairly well for Afghanistan at the time, but it did not have, as I said, it wasn't nurtured enough, unfortunately. And as a result, it was easily overthrown. But that period that came afterwards, 5 years from 73 to 77, which is right before the Iranian Revolution, is critical because that's when the Soviets and the communist elements that were trained in the Soviet Union were mainly in the military, were starting to plan for a more important takeover. They didn't want the president who used to be a prince to continue, and especially when they realized that president was started by 77 or so, started leaning a bit more towards the West, and the Shah of Iran, and the King of Saudi Arabia, and the President of Egypt, and through those wanted new relationships with the West. So I'm putting all of this in context because this is the rivalry between East and West at the time, between the Soviet Union and America mainly. And so you have elements that are closer to the Soviet Union trying to do something, and there are counter elements who are trying to rebalance, let's say. And as soon as we rebalanced, there was another coup. And this time it basically got rid of the presidency, and his name was Daoud Khan, who was then president. Basically, his whole family was massacred, including children. And the country fell into the hands of the pro-Moscow elements. April
who was
1978.
The coup? Who started the coup? Who orchestrated it?
The military, backed somewhat, encouraged by Moscow. They were the ones who staged the coup. They had enough influence to be able to overthrow that government and tilt Afghanistan totally towards the Soviet Union. So that balancing act ended between East and West. And we fell into the Soviet orbit. And that was a major, you guys are not old enough. I'm old enough to remember, because that period was followed by the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979.
Yes.
December 79, right before Christmas. And I had become a refugee at the time. Right at that moment, I had become a refugee. I was in Europe. I had not reached the United States yet. And we started hearing that the communist government that had taken over was facing a rebellion by the Afghan people. And the rebellion grew and became a threat to that new government run, sort of managed by Moscow. And as a result, Moscow decided to invade Afghanistan. And they sent in more than 100,000 Red Army troops, airborne and others, into Afghanistan and occupied Afghanistan, basically. But as a result, the Afghan people, their resistance and their attempt to basically neutralize this occupation grew. And so then we see the beginning of a new phase in Afghanistan that lasted from 78, 79 until 1992, the end of the communist government in Afghanistan. So for almost 13, 14 years, Afghans were busy fighting a war between the communist government supported by Moscow and the so-called Mujahideen, the holy warriors or the anti-Soviet elements fighting it and being backed this time by the United States and many others.
Yeah, this was a period of time when they spoke about the United States not only financially helping Afghanistan, but militarily helping.
Covertly.
Yes.
It was the
weapons.
largest covert operation. I don't know if it still is, but for a long time, it was the largest covert operation in the U.S. history.
Now, at the time when this was taking place, was bin Laden and Al-Qaeda formed, or were they?
Very good question. So, from what we know, bin Laden, who was a Saudi citizen, and many others from across the Islamic world, from Morocco all the way to Indonesia, who felt a duty to join this holy war against the Soviet Union, against communist elements. Some of them came to Pakistan. Pakistan became sort of the staging ground for this war in Afghanistan. Every dollar that went to Afghanistan for the war against the Soviets had to pass through Pakistan. Iran at the time had a totally different story. Iran had undergone a revolution. There were millions of Afghans in Iran, and Iran was supporting some of these Afghans fight the Soviets as well. But Iran had its own issues and problems. It had the Iraq war to deal with, and it wasn't as invested or vested in Afghanistan as Pakistan was. Pakistan became the frontline state. And through Pakistan, many countries, including Arab countries, European countries, even China, and America, of course, were channeling money and equipment to some extent to help the Afghans fight the Soviets inside Afghanistan. This is when people like bin Laden in the 1980s came into the picture. They came to Pakistan. They opened offices, not Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda had not been formed yet. They were mostly under the guise of humanitarian or whatever offices, but they were involved in funding the fight against the Soviets as well. Occasionally, they would send people inside Afghanistan pretending, taking pictures of them fighting the communists, and it was sort of a propaganda war. But they had their own agenda. You could tell that they were running, they had their own agenda. They thought that Afghanistan was the place to be, the place to maybe continue some sort of effort, struggle beyond Afghanistan. That's when that idea came to their mind. that we are going to, first of all, settle this issue, help settle this issue. America's helping, everybody's helping. And then we have our own plans. We won't tell anyone, but we have our own agenda. And so by the late 1980s, early 1990s, they started developing this idea of creating an organization like Al-Qaeda while they were in Pakistan and occasionally going to Afghanistan. By 1992, the government in Afghanistan, the communist government, fell. And as a result, unfortunately, all those Afghan groups that were fighting the Soviet-backed government failed to create a unified government.
Yeah, same thing happened in Armenia. A lot of when the Soviet Union fell, 92.
Yeah.
Armenia was the first country to declare independence against
Right.
the Soviets,
Right.
and it was like a domino effect right after that.
Exactly. And so 92 is a time when by 92, the Soviet Union has dissolved. Within the next year or two, you see the Warsaw Pact dissolving.
Mm-hmm.
You see all these republics like Armenia and all these in the Caucasus and Central Asia, and on the European side, like Ukraine and others, become independent republics. So Russia emerges, in a different format, let's say, and we have now a different world. It's a new world order.
Completely.
And America feels dominant, right? Russia feels somewhat subdued. China is on the rise, but we're not really paying too much attention to China at the time. And the focus is still on the Middle East. The issues are unresolved. Afghanistan falls into a civil war situation with no one really gaining upper hand until a new group emerges called the Taliban by 1996, 95, 96. And by 1996, the Taliban are able to take Kabul, the capital, after a lot of fighting between different groups, and most of the country, but not all of it.
How involved were you in 96 at the time?
Quite a bit.
Taliban was now involved in Afghanistan.
Well, I have to tell you, I got involved almost around 78 when I was in Kabul as a student in high school. I was involved in small-scale little underground activities against the communist government. That got me in trouble, almost got me killed. I had unfortunately, some of my best friends disappeared. Family members disappeared. So that's why my family had to ship me out quickly. I was 17, 18 years old.
Disappeared as in?
Disappeared, to this day, disappeared. They were unfortunately executed and killed. So a lot of these things happened to Afghans. A lot of Afghan families were hurt and they lost members of their families during the 78 to 92 period. That period saw, the estimates are that during that war against the communists and the Soviets, we lost around 1.5 million people.
Wow.
In a country of about 15 million. That's 10%.
That's massive.
It's massive.
I mean, that's a genocide in essence.
So the killing took place on both sides, and most of the victims were civilians. So Soviets would go into what they used to call carpet bombing, like in Vietnam they used to do. So there was carpet bombing of Afghan villages, and all of a sudden you saw a whole district, a whole province empty from its inhabitants because they had to flee. Either to die or flee. So Afghanistan created the largest refugee population in the world. And to this day, Afghanistan still is in the top 5. Even though in the last 3 years or so under the Taliban, Pakistan and Iran have pushed back almost 4 million Afghans, 3 to 4 million Afghans back into Afghanistan.
Mm.
And I'm giving you the lower numbers. So we ended up having millions of people flee the country, millions of others stuck in the country, and many fighting. And this, we went from one stage of fighting to another stage of fighting to another stage of fighting until the Taliban came and the fighting continued. Taliban version 1. Taliban version 1 is 1996, 2001, right when 9/11 takes place. So 9/11 is an important point of reference here, because it involves Afghanistan, it involves America, it involves Al-Qaeda, and everything that happened since then.
We have our thoughts about 9/11.
Right.
We don't only think it was Al-Qaeda and Afghanistan. I mean, the boys could agree as well. We think Israel had a massive hand in that as well.
There are all kinds of theories nowadays. I agree. I've read and seen some of them. What I do know is that yes, there were some elements whose names we know, faces we've seen that were involved. Who else was involved? It's very difficult to know.
Yeah, at this point, it's just speculation.
Right. So there's a lot of speculation, but hopefully one day things will come out and we will have facts and evidence of one thing or another. From what I saw, because I was, as you asked, I was very much involved in the 1990s, and not as in government or anything, or not affiliated with anyone, but as an Afghan American by then, I was very much involved in trying to at least tell people that something important is taking place in Afghanistan. You need to pay attention. This was before 9/11. And my whole message was, to the Afghans, it was, we need to end this war amongst ourselves. And we need to find stability in some kind of political settlement before our country becomes a victim of terrorism or victim of this or that again. And to those outside of Afghanistan, the Americans and others, it was that you guys need to realize that Afghans have lost control over their country, and we need to help them regain control over their country.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. From the outside in, when you looked at it, it looked like the country had been infiltrated by outsiders.
On many occasions.
That quick?
Yep, that's why we're the best.
Thank you, sir. Oh, by the way, sorry about your car.
Oh no!
If you've been injured in a car accident, slip and fall, or work injury, reach out to Emergence Law today.
At Emergence Law, we maximize your compensation, you get constant client communication, and we win when it matters most.
But when you say, that was your advice to the people before terrorists took over, I mean, essentially at the time, what were the two organizations considered, Taliban and Al-Qaeda? At least to the people of Afghanistan, what were they considered? Just mercenaries, militia? What was?
So Al-Qaeda was a foreign entity, not Afghan. Al-Qaeda was made up of mostly Arabs and others from other parts of the Islamic world. Probably very few Afghans or none were part of it, from what I know. As you know, 9/11. If we go by what the record says, what the reporting says, was carried out by individuals who are not Afghan. Some people think that just because Al-Qaeda had a base in Afghanistan, that it had anything to do with Afghans, but it didn't. We're not even sure to what extent it had anything to do with the Taliban at the time, to what extent the Taliban knew about it, to what extent were they part of the thinking or the planning or anything. But there's no evidence that they really were involved in any of that. They only were hosting Al-Qaeda because Al-Qaeda had been kind to the Mujahideen in the 1980s. And so they felt some kind of debt to Al-Qaeda for giving them refuge in Afghanistan, and which was a mistake, in my opinion. They shouldn't have done that. They should have cut ties with Al-Qaeda, which now they claim nowadays, after 2021, after the Afghan Republic collapsed, we haven't gotten to that part yet, they claim that they have severe ties. So their agreement with the United States that they have as of 2020 is that they will not allow any international terrorist group, especially Al-Qaeda and others, to find a base in Afghanistan, to use Afghanistan to attack others, and to be a threat to the West, the US, and its allies. So that is the commitment that the Taliban today have given to the United States, and the United States is counting on the Taliban to continue that pledge that they have given. In the same way that Americans are saying, okay, if you do that, we leave. And that's exactly what they did. If you're going to make sure that there's no threat, we are going to leave Afghanistan, which is what they did in 2021. We'll get to that. So aside from that, the Taliban themselves, now Al-Qaeda is pretty clear as to where they stand and what their relationship was or is with Afghanistan today. It's to the point where US intelligence, again, if you believe everything that US intelligence feels that it's not a threat as it used to be, and it's something that's controllable.
But do you think
manageable.
do you think that Al Qaeda was artificially created by the United States and the West to create this fake government type of entity in order to create some sort of false flag to invade Afghanistan?
I don't know for a fact.
Because they talk about
yeah.
the bin Laden family being one of the wealthiest
Right.
families in the Middle East. Mohammed bin Laden was a contractor for the Saudis, creating thousands of oil rigs in the 1950s. And then him allegedly having 54 children, one of his children becomes a rebel, is exiled from Saudi Arabia, goes into Afghanistan, forms and creates Al-Qaeda, and then 2001, a terrorist attack takes place in New York City, and you talk about two buildings collapsing. Building number 7, that's behind the Twin Towers, which till today nobody
Three
knows
buildings.
how that building collapsed.
Three buildings. Not
I'm
two.
sorry?
3 buildings.
Well, it was the Twin Towers, and then it was the building number 7 behind that collapsed.
3 buildings.
Yeah, which nobody knows how that building collapsed. Looked like a controlled demolition. And then they talk about how hot the fire was, and it melted the steel, and those buildings collapsed. Yet they found international passports at the rubble sites of Saudi pilots, fully intact on a domestic flight. I mean, if you look at that and you say, okay, was this a terrorist attack or was it a false flag? I mean, what are your thoughts on something like this?
I really can't tell you for a fact, to be honest, as to what part of this is true, what part isn't. What we do know from what we've been exposed to, what I've been exposed to, is that Al-Qaeda did have an agenda. Now, why was Al-Qaeda formed, how it was formed, for what purpose, I unfortunately cannot answer that. I don't know for a fact. Maybe somebody who was inside US intelligence probably knows about that, or anybody else's intelligence. But from what we know, Al-Qaeda was involved in these attacks. These individuals were involved. How it was carried out or for what purpose is something that's beyond my pay scale, let's say. But it raises questions about a lot of different issues in the region. So for somebody like myself, the bigger question is, how did that impact Afghanistan? The whole, and what did we get out of this involvement thereafter, right?
Yes.
So after 9/11, there was this operation by October of 2001. The United States and NATO gets involved. This is when I returned to Afghanistan. I was in Kabul in December of 2001, one of the first African Americans to return, in the hopes of serving my country, of trying to be part of the rebuilding effort of Afghanistan, like others did. And putting behind 20-something years of warfare and starting fresh, but a country that was almost totally destroyed. So that was our hope. That was what we were aiming for. At least I was. Putting in a new government that people could agree with. Basically rebuilding a state and a nation, reopening the country's borders so refugees could come back. Installing and basically coming up with a new constitution. Mm-hmm. I remember the time when my grandfather had helped others build a new constitution, and here we were trying to instill and basically put together a new government, legal, legitimate, constitutional. We basically were all pro-democracy, pro-human rights. Women had the same given the same rights as men again. And one thing that we, I think, didn't pay enough attention to was that we needed to have a strategy to end the war that the Americans were now carrying out in Afghanistan after 2001, to go after Al-Qaeda, to go after any terrorist elements, to go after Taliban, who had now sort of melted into, some camp somewhere. Some of them ended up in Pakistan. Actually, a few of them ended up in Iran, and others ended up in Afghanistan in their villages. Instead of aiming to end the war and find a peaceful resolution to years of warfare, this became it was called war on terror.
Yes.
So for 20 years, we were part of the war on terror.
Well, that's what was depicted by the media.
Yes. So, and it became really, then Iraq happened. Then you had other terrorist groups emerge. And you had all kinds of, it wasn't just Afghanistan anymore. It became something much bigger.
Well, let me ask you this. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, because I kind of want to stay on this before we get into Iraq and Iran. We've had veterans on that. They've talked about what took place in Afghanistan. And majority of them, when you speak to them on and off camera, on and off the microphone, till today, they don't know why they were there. A lot of them were even talking about guarding poppy fields. And you think about it and you go, okay, so are we out there to fight Al-Qaeda, take out the Taliban, find Osama bin Laden, or are we there to guard opium fields? I mean, what are the stories behind the acres and acres of opium fields in Afghanistan true?
Great question. My answer to that, based on the facts, the numbers, the figures, are that we failed to eradicate poppy. Did we fail on purpose? Was it part of some kind of a secret operation or something? I don't know, but what I do know is that we claimed to have spent billions of dollars on counter narcotics.
We as in who, Afghanistan or the US?
The US money, European money. For a long time, the UK had the lead on this. The Americans had the lead at times, depending on where in Afghanistan, because there were many different provinces where it was being cultivated and processed and all of that. So what I can tell you is that we failed. Despite all these the imagery and the efforts, it not only not decreased, it actually increased and we became the largest producer of opium in the world under this 20-year republic. But the funny part is that since the Taliban took over 4.5, almost 5 years ago, that poppy production, that cultivation, production, smuggling, whatever you want to call it, has almost decreased according to reliable international monitors, has decreased by at least 90%.
Oh, it's huge.
I mean, what type of numbers are we talking about prior to the decrease? Like, how much of that was contributing to, let's say, the Afghan economy?
Quite a bit. We're talking about, I don't have the right figures, but it's available, or whatever has been published by UN agencies and others, independent and others. We're talking about in the hundreds of billions.
Oh, wow.
We talk overall over the last 20 years, over
20
those
years,
20
okay.
years. So billions of dollars per year of trade. And most of it went to, so here you are in Afghanistan, and you cultivate all this product, if you want to call it. It has to go somewhere. So either you fly it out, but then somebody knows that it was flown out. Somebody should know. Or it's all smuggled through our borders. So which are the borders that are open for smuggling? From the statistics that we have, the majority went west to Iran and north to the ex-Soviet republics in Russia. Some of it went to Pakistan, of course, but most of it went north and west. And then from there, either they were used, consumed locally, and became part of the markets in those countries, and then most of it beyond that went into Europe, all the way to Canada and the United States.
Yeah. So look at these numbers. I just pulled up these numbers. So in between 1999 and 2000, roughly around 7,000 metric tons of opium was in production.
That's under the Taliban.
No. This is
99 to 2000,
2000.
and then it goes down.
And then in 2001, it drops down to 185 metric
Yes,
tons.
that's the last year of the Taliban.
Correct.
Yes.
And then when you look at it now, this is the 1 year that it dropped. The following year in 2002, it shoots back up to 3,400 metric tons. By 2007, it's at 8,700 metric tons of opium. So now when you look at this and you hear the stories behind some of these soldiers or veterans who talked about, well, we were not only out there to fight against terrorists, but we were there to guard poppy fields. 2001, it goes down because of the Taliban. All of a sudden, we're in war with Afghanistan, shoots back up to 3,000 metric tons. So who is this opium being sold to?
As I tried to explain, the opium, very small part of it was consumed inside Afghanistan. We actually ended up with the largest number of opium addicts by 2020, 2021. And then again, if you look at the numbers now, there are almost no addicts in Afghanistan.
This is not the hashish that they talk about, right?
Well, hashish is part of it. So it's a derivative. So there are different hashish. I'm not an expert in narcotics.
No, I know. we're not claiming that you're an expert.
I don't want to come across as such, but there are different variants, and so opium obviously has its own set of derivatives, and then there are others, like from marijuana, you get other types of drugs. So all of that was cultivated in Afghanistan. Still is, but much less than what it used to be.
Yeah,
much less.
It's not a pharmaceutical, right?
No.
Well, I mean, the opium, the opiates can then be used. So one idea at the time, and I was part of the negotiations at one point, was to turn Afghanistan's opium production into a legal pharmaceutical production. But that did not fly. Some people didn't want it to fly, probably. Others thought it was too difficult to implement. It required a very strong infrastructure, legal structures to implement such a sophisticated scheme. We could have sold it to countries to use it for pharmaceutical reasons. For some reason, we didn't. So there's a lot of politics behind all of that, but I'm not privy to what exactly was driving it.
Do you recall what? Because I remember seeing a recent clip of John Kiriakou, I forget which podcast he was on, where he talked about right after 9/11 how the U.S. had, I remember the 93%. Do you remember what he was referencing? I don't know if they were controlling 90% of those poppy field distribution, or
we produced 93% of the opium in the world.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
At one point, we produced most of the opium in the world. But unfortunately, as I said, it didn't go through the legitimate channels, the clean channels, for the purposes of opiates for drug usage and pharmaceutical usage.
Because you look at the United States being involved in Afghanistan, and then you fast forward to the Iraq War, as far as the United States being involved in Iraq, then they talk about the weapons of mass destruction and how Iraq is creating nuclear weapons, and they have weapons that could take out the Middle East, and they're looking to create a dictatorship. And then now the United States gets involved in Iraq. And again, boots on the ground. Now, fast forward to 2026, we've yet to find any sort of weapons of mass destruction. The United States recently left Afghanistan and left billions of dollars in military equipment to the Taliban, of which, half those guys there didn't even know how to operate a lot of it. I mean, there was videos of Black Hawk helicopters attempting to be flown and crashed and destroyed. What are your thoughts on the United States exit of Afghanistan?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on the United States exit about Afghanistan. I've written a lot about that. I've spoken a lot about this.
Sorry, were you in government at the time?
So I ended up in government in 2002.
Okay.
At the end of 2001, I became the spokesperson for the government, the foreign ministry, and then I was in Kabul for almost 4 years, and part of, involved in many of the discussions that we had with the international community. And the fact that Afghanistan became the largest recipient of foreign aid. Some estimates are that the United States alone has spent almost $2 trillion on the war effort overall in Afghanistan. Out of that, about $1 trillion on its Afghanistan military and civilian projects. And out of that, about 230 or 40 billion on the reconstruction of Afghanistan infrastructure, governance, and all of that. So Afghanistan was a huge recipient of U.S. aid, but it wasn't just the U.S. It was all the major donors of the world, from Japan to Europe, to Canada, and others. And so, I served in Canada as an ambassador for almost 5 years. And during my tenure, Afghanistan was the largest recipient of Canadian aid. And the Canadians had thousands of troops in Afghanistan fighting alongside Americans and others in difficult circumstances. And so it was a huge political issue as well in Canada while I was there. While I was in France later on, again, the French were involved, but not as much as the others, but also then realized that they had to pull out at some point. So Afghanistan was for many years the place to spend, besides Iraq. Iraq actually had more expenditure allocated to it. So these wars, alongside smaller ones that were going on, as part of the war on terror, were very costly, extremely costly. What kind of results did they leave? Before I get to your question, I'm sorry. It's a mixed picture. For Afghanistan, I can tell you that we're still one of the poorest countries in the world after all that money was spent. Right now, 90% of Afghans don't have food to eat. Right now, Afghans who are dependent on foreign aid have $0 going from the United States. Under the Trump administration, all aid has been cut to Afghanistan, including humanitarian aid. So this is part of the politics of today's administration. The Biden administration had some aid going to Afghanistan for humanitarian reasons, but the Taliban are obviously isolated. They're not recognized as the government. They have relationships with other countries in the region, including Russia. Russia is the only country that has recognized them officially.
So who is operating the government, though?
The Taliban are operating the government.
But they're not recognized by any.
They're not recognized internationally, but they have so-called de facto relationships with many countries, including India, China, Russia, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, the Arab states, the Central Asians, with all of those. But they are not officially, except for Russia, recognized by the rest, because mostly of several reasons. One, everyone is very upset with the fact that they have not done very well in terms of treating women. They've prevented girls beyond grade 6 from continuing their education. They prevented many women from working, almost all, with few exceptions. And at the same time, it's funny, they allow women to be businesswomen. They allow women in the private sector to a large extent. So it's a weird situation where there are conflicting sort of views on it. And this has upset a lot in the international community, of course. They also had made pledges and during their negotiations with the Americans and other Afghans that they would aim for a more inclusive government, that they won't come in and grab power just for themselves. But unfortunately, that did not happen either. They are not as inclusive as some people would like them to be, and they are seen as being very somewhat fearful of allowing other Afghans to help them with governance issues. So that is another issue. Number three issue, the most important, is how are they actually carrying out their commitments towards counterterrorism? That what we discussed earlier, their commitments to fight Al-Qaeda or prevent Al-Qaeda from being a threat, or any other group from being a threat. And then there's this other element that emerged in the past few years called Islamic State, IS, right? ISIS, ISIL, whatever you want to call them. They are a threat in Afghanistan and around Afghanistan. They want to also have a foothold in Afghanistan. Interestingly enough, the Taliban are the ones that are pushing them out. So the Taliban are the ones that seem to be against an ISIS presence in Afghanistan. They see them as a threat. So they're fighting them.
So a radical Islamic organization is being pushed out by another radical Islamic organization.
So yes, so in Afghanistan, the Taliban authorities, and we can describe them in so many different ways. Everyone has their own ways of describing them. Those guys who used to be a militant group, who used to fight at different times, and were able to basically convince the Americans that they need to negotiate their way out of Afghanistan after 15 years of another round of fighting that took place in Afghanistan, where more than 2,500 Americans lost their lives. And trillions of dollars were spent. They consider a group like ISIS as a threat. And they have been fighting them, and they actually pushed them out of Afghanistan. ISIS now, from what the reports say, reside in Pakistan. And they're also in the Middle East and other places. Al-Qaeda, interestingly enough, from what U.S. intelligence is saying, is under control in Afghanistan. They don't seem to be active. They may try to, either in Afghanistan or still maybe in the region, to reactivate themselves. But I think they are sort of more or less operational in places like Africa, in some parts of the Middle East, not so much nowadays in Afghanistan. So the Taliban have, to a large extent, been able to subdue them or keep them under watch, or maybe, I don't know what they're doing, but Al-Qaeda doesn't seem to be as much of a threat as it used to be, per U.S. intelligence reporting.
So is it safe to say that the most recent constitution, which you mentioned was written, about 20-some years ago, is not being followed through by the Taliban?
No, it's not. That constitution is on hold by the Taliban. They are not, per se, adhering to it. There are some laws from the past that are still being followed, but the Taliban have a unique way of trying to govern. They have their own way of govern, and it's through edicts, and it's through what they call a Sharia-based system. And their interpretation of Sharia in Afghanistan is what they use mostly in jurisprudence and in the way they follow laws and rules.
But what do you think their objective is, as far as keeping the Afghani people at a 90% like poverty and not having access to food and all that? That's by design, or is it just that the country itself just doesn't have the infrastructure to support? I don't know what the population is there, but what is the reason?
About 40 million now.
40?
About 40 million is the latter. It's not by design. It's just not having the ability, the capacity, and the resources to deal with the economy the way they should. Remember, almost, if I'm not mistaken, 75% of the Afghan budget and economy or development, let's say, was basically reliant on foreign aid before the Taliban came back to power. So for those 20 years, we were supposed to be more self-reliant. We became a bit more self-reliant, but not much. So when you depended 75% on foreign aid to run your government and to pay for projects and development, obviously that went to zero. It went from billions of dollars, I think the last estimate was 5 or 6 billion per year, to zero. Then, so the current government in Afghanistan has to rely on its own income and resources, which obviously is much less than what it used to be. So the economy has tanked. We also, the government, the Taliban government, has also been cut from the international financial system, which means that the banking system is no longer linked to the international banking system. So the banks cannot operate normally with Afghanistan.
So their currency is practically
Interestingly enough, the currency is very strong.
Is it?
For some odd reason, the Afghan currency is stronger than all the currencies in that region of the world, including the Iranian currency, the Pakistani currency.
What's their currency?
Well, the Afghani is stronger now. If you look at the Afghani in 2022 versus US dollar, let's say, to Afghani now, I think the difference is about maybe a 20-30% increase in the value of the Afghani.
Technology should move your business forward, not hold it back. At Titan Elite IT Services and Consulting, we make sure it does. Our clients don't wait days for help. They get real-time answers, fast resolutions, and dedicated support, both on-site and remote. From Los Angeles to Orange and Ventura counties, our coverage is local, statewide, and nationwide. When you need us, we're already on the way. We're not just an MSP, we build with you. From cloud migration to security to every endpoint in your network.
At Titan Elite, we don't just solve problems, we prevent them from happening. We become a part of your team and we grow with you.
Titan Elite IT Services and Consulting. Strategic, scalable, trusted, and always on.
Are you looking for a place to kick back and celebrate? Well, the Glen Arden Club has got you covered. Upstairs, you got a private lounge with a cigar room. Downstairs, you got the moose den, where you can have cocktails and private events. Hey, are you even hungry? They got an outside pizzeria serving one of the best pizzas in town. If you're interested in becoming a member with the Glen Arden Club or booking an event, contact the WiseNuts. We'll connect you to the boys at the Glen Arden, and you could become a member here or host your next gathering.
The aids were cut off and the banking system pretty much, I guess, shied away from Afghanistan because it was labeled as a terrorist state, I'm assuming, or?
So it's still, by the United Nations, considered as on a list of terrorist entities that needs to be monitored, and they're blacklisted, basically. They have individuals who are now their leaders, who cannot travel, for example, or cannot engage in any transactions. So yes, basically they are blacklisted, and that obviously has hurt Afghanistan because a 40 million population is sort of at the mercy of what happens internationally and what happens locally with the Taliban not being recognized. And so that's a problem for Afghanistan and its people.
So in the this all ties into like that 99 to 2000 time period. In the 1990s, between 1990 and 1996, between 1990 and 1991, it was 50 Afghans would equal $1.
Afghani, yeah?
Afghani would equal $1. Now you fast forward to 2001, it was 70,000 Afghanis would equal $1.
Right.
And then past 2001, then you go into 2002, literally 1 year later, it goes from the thousands to 43.
Because the currency was a different...
Yeah, it goes to 43.
Value, yeah.
Today, in 2025, 2026, it fluctuates between 62 to 65.
Do you see? The Afghani that we have known for the past 20 years or so, 25 years, has actually gained and there are reasons for it, macroeconomic reasons. There are reasons that have to do with the fact that the Taliban are relying on domestic resources, that they have created their own system, that there is trade taking place with the region, that the foreign aid money is not coming in, so it's not diluting. There are all kinds of different reasons, and I'm again not an expert in economics, but they have been also. Some people say that they're receiving money from the West. It's not very clear as to what kind of money this is. They're receiving some kind of monthly or quarterly payments, excuse me, that are tied to the agreement with the United States. It could be counterterrorism issues that have to do with counterterrorism. I'm not exactly 100% sure, but that's not large enough to be able to sustain the value of the currency that to that extent.
What is the currency backed by? Is it backed by anything as far as gold or?
Well, the money that was part of the central bank, where it backs the currency, most of it resides outside of Afghanistan, is actually now frozen. The United States and a few other countries froze Afghanistan's assets that were sitting in overseas banks. So there are, again, several $1 billion that are frozen. Those are Afghanistan central bank assets. So that is usually used to support and be the backup for the currency and the economy overall, the macroeconomics of the country. There's very little in the country itself, whatever is left. I think that part of it has to do with how a self-running economy is trying to survive. And the way that survival takes place in Afghanistan is such that they are able to collect revenues and taxes, spend some of it in domestically. Obviously, some of it is spent for their own security, and they don't owe anybody anything. So there's no debt.
They're only in debt to themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So Afghanistan is a special case when it comes to.
But I'm surprised at the fact that Afghanistan has so much natural resources. I mean, it says anywhere from 1 to 3 trillion in natural resources, yet the overall GDP is under $20 billion, which. Yeah. How come those natural resources, minerals and all, are not being utilized?
So that's a very big question and a difficult one to answer. Some of it goes back to the fact that we never really built the infrastructure and the legal system in the past 25 years after 9/11 to make good use of these resources. Number two issue is that we never had the level of security and peace in the country that is needed in order to invest in those sectors, because the war was still going on, right? Until the Taliban emerged as victors. So when you don't have enough security and stability, there are very few large companies who are willing to invest. And if you don't have the right legal structures and the infrastructure needed for such big mines, let's say, and minerals that have to be exploited, again, they stay underground.
I mean, I may be oversimplifying it, but I would think, for example, let's say, if I would understand with a GDP of only 18, 19 billion, you wouldn't have the funds to even build the infrastructure. But wouldn't, let's say, countries like the US, China, Russia, or whoever, maybe India, would be interested in, for example, US would come in, build the infrastructure, the mining systems, whatever you need, plus they would station the military there as protection. And for instance, if they mine $200 billion a year worth of minerals or whatnot. And say Afghanistan, the government, the people get a 20% cut or whatever that is. Isn't that essentially how it works? Or what?
Yes, it does, and it should have. As I said, first, security was an issue. Second, the lack of infrastructure and structures, legal structures were an issue. Governance was an issue. Corruption, rising corruption was an issue. It prevented others from coming in and wanting to do business. And finally, you alluded to it, sort of, I would say, what I would call geo-economic competition. The Chinese showed interest in certain mines in Afghanistan. The Indians did, the Turks, the Americans even to some extent. You know, we are sitting on one of the largest and best quality lithium in the world. Lithium.
Lithium for batteries.
That is used more and more for all kinds of stuff.
I'm curious if Elon Musk knows about that.
I think I'm sure he has. If he hasn't, this may be time for him.
Hey, Elon, if you're watching.
So, yes. So,
by the way, we'd want a percentage of that. Just an FYI.
3% will do.
Don't forget Afghanistan.
Yes.
So I'm just giving you one example of a mineral that is very much in demand. We have many. Right now, there's a huge gold rush in northern Afghanistan, and people are very upset because it's not as regulated as it should be. And there's so much gold that they've found in several provinces, and it's not exploited properly, according to norms, let's say. And so the more you don't do that, the more it becomes a job for the mafia to take over.
I'm shocked. We're living in 2026 right now. The United States, during the gold rush in the 1800s, you had people going out there with pickets and shovels.
Which is exactly what's happening in Afghanistan right now.
That's what I'm shocked about. It's like, are these people not utilizing it or not harvesting the gold properly, or is it being stolen, or is it like what's going on that they're not able to capitalize on these minerals, especially lithium? I mean, you'd be. I'm shocked that the government itself. Well, again, it's being run by the Taliban, but some sort of government entity is not saying that. Listen, majority of the United States and Europe is now going EV. In fact, China as well is going EV with these electrical vehicles. Why not go into Afghanistan and cut a deal with them where we can harvest these?
I'm sure they would love to do that. So one of the obstacles are these sanctions that have been imposed on Afghanistan. As I told you, Afghanistan is blacklisted. The Taliban are blacklisted. As a result, Afghanistan is suffering. Sanctions imposed on the Taliban and on Afghanistan have hurt because they prevent people from investing. And so what it does is it leaves the door open for others. So non-Western investors, people who don't care about the sanctions, like the Chinese and the Russians maybe and others who don't mind overcoming those sanctions and going in. So that the door is sort of open for the competition. That's why I was trying to allude to the competition that's going on right now about the minerals in Afghanistan. And so they're cutting deals. And so this deal cutting is not done according to norms anymore because everyone is trying to increase its profit margin.
Of course, everybody's hand is in the cookie jar at this
Exactly.
point.
So whoever gives the best sort of transactional deal gets the project or gets the... But again, we're still lacking railroads that can move stuff in and out, good roads, for example. Security is to a large extent assured, even though that could become problematic down the road. But right now, the Taliban seem to be, to a large extent, in control of the country. And the country seems to be, from a security point of view, because there's no more war going on, except for ISIS occasionally being a threat. There's nothing else going on. So this is why it's stable. And this is why whatever happens in our periphery seems unstable. And Afghanistan has all of a sudden become this island of stability in a region that's seeking stability, like Iran, for example.
Yeah.
Pakistan has a lot of issues domestically They're also blaming the Taliban in Afghanistan for promoting some type of terrorism through the Pakistani Taliban in Pakistan, which has become an irritant quite a bit. And we've had actually fighting going on between Pakistan and Afghanistan for the past few months. Hundreds of people have been killed between Afghanistan and Pakistan. This is the Pakistan that used to harbor the Afghan Taliban, is now turned against them.
Well, considering the fact that Afghanistan probably doesn't have the strict regulations California does, I'm sure by the time this episode airs, China could build all the railroads and the infrastructure.
If China wanted to, China's strategy is very interesting. China is very slow, but they are somewhat dedicated to having a long-term strategy in Afghanistan. They know the value of Afghanistan, like all the others do too. What they're doing with it is another issue, as you said.
Yeah.
But China's game is a long game. It's very strategic. It's obviously also rooted in the Belt and Road Initiative.
The what road?
It's called the Belt and Road Initiative, which is this huge Chinese attempt at opening markets around the world, especially in Asia, Eurasia, and in Africa. And they're building all kinds of infrastructure around the world, especially in that part of the world, in order to expand Chinese economic footprint. And so the Americans don't really have a counterweight to that, at least yet. Not a counterweight in the sense of creating more tension. I believe in less tension being more profitable for both sides.
Of course.
If both sides can work with each other, it's better for them from a business perspective.
Absolutely.
Than to fight each other and impose tariffs that hurt, I don't know who it hurts at the end of the day. Maybe it hurts the American public, or certain tariffs that help some sectors in America but hurt others. So it's a very complicated issue, but strategy is lacking.
I feel like at this point, with the Taliban operating and running the country, they don't have the people's best interest. I feel like the Taliban has the Taliban's best interest.
Of course, they have their best interest at heart, but they also have to answer to the Afghan people. Not that they feel compelled to do so, but at the end of the day in Afghanistan, the system is such, the social sort of community relationship system in Afghanistan is such that you have to take into account the will of large communities, other leaders, and not just your own party or group. If you fail to do so, that's one of the lessons of Afghanistan. And that's one of my messages to the Taliban, is that if you fail to take into account other Afghans, if you fail to take into account Afghan women and girls who need education, if you fail to take into account all these other ethnic groups and social groups in Afghanistan, you will be repeating the same mistakes that the communists made and others made along the way by being exclusionary and not inclusive and creating a weaker country than a stronger country, right?
Yeah.
The more inclusive you are, the stronger you become. The less inclusive, the weaker you become, in my opinion, from my lessons, from my last...
it all depends on where you're going with the inclusivity, obviously.
Right.
But
no, inclusivity in terms of, general...
There you go. There, that's
general goodwill, the well-being of your country, the well-being of the majority of your country.
Yeah. Because at this point, you look at the war, not only the 2001 war that took place, but the multiple wars that the country of Afghanistan has been going through. It's been taken back like hundreds of years at this point, to the point where them rebuilding needs to happen. Well, it should have happened much longer time ago.
Could have,
but
yes.
Yeah, but it's sad that, as I mentioned, the government itself is not looking out for its people. It's looking out for its own best interest. And it's shocking, the fact that the Afghan currency is remaining as strong as it is. I wish it, I wasn't saying this, but I wish it was lower, because at this point, foreign aid coming in from whether it's the United States, Canada, Europe, as far as family members, helping family members, at least at that point, a dollar can go a much longer way.
Well, that money is going in. So that the remittances sent by Afghans overseas, because there are millions of Afghans overseas, and I don't know the exact number, but they're in the billions again per year. That goes on, even though the banking system is not as functional as as it should be. There are other ways of sending money to people to support them. So that is one. Actually, you're pointing to a very good cause of the stability of the currency, is that the money that goes in from the remittances supports part of the economy, actually. Okay. But it's small.
It's a drop in the bucket.
It's a drop. Yeah.
I mean, imagine, I guess when we discuss, for example, Armenia, right? We've had this discussion last couple of episodes where we sometimes criticize the current administration, but when you compare it, right, as far as Armenia's been independent for about 34 years now, and then last few years we've had a couple of wars. Yet if you actually, and the economy, the GDP is right around where Afghanistan's is, which is, I think, in the $18 or so billion per year.
Smaller population, smaller land
mass. Much smaller population, but as far as the growth that it's had, the development is, in comparison, I guess, commendable, right? Because there's a lot of real estate, a lot of just tourism going on. And I would think, obviously, Afghanistan has far more resources than Armenia does as far as natural resources goes. But yet, Armenia has been able to capitalize on its relationships, even though, again, the diaspora constantly criticizes it for its administration and the upcoming elections and whatnot. But they seem to be doing okay in comparison.
And they're capitalizing with the tourism. I mean, I was there just recently in September, and you had Iranians there, Russians there, Europeans there, Americans there. You had a bunch of people, and they capitalized with the tourism. Yeah. Afghanistan has beautiful places as well, and we've heard about the hospitality, the people there, and it's unfortunate that, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, that the media has depicted them completely differently. The Afghani people are very hospitable, and the areas and the regions and the architecture, from the mosques to the
ancient history.
Absolutely.
We go back to Alexander the Great. We have historical sites that go back to the time when Alexander came through there, for example.
It's a rich history.
Heritage. And
it's a very rich history.
So many different heritages that came and went. And you're right. You're absolutely right. So let me point to the fact that I think, number one, it's a legitimacy issue, right? So Afghanistan's current administration not being considered legitimate enough by some, and lacking that kind of legitimacy that is needed in order to be recognized. So recognition is an issue, has hurt it. And then on top of that, sanctions that have been imposed on the country, one of the poorest countries, again, where 90% of the people are dependent on a handout. They live on a less than $1.5 a day.
Yeah.
That's the livelihood amount calculated per person in Afghanistan today. And that is obviously not sustainable. So the country is facing a huge crisis. And on top of that, over the last 3 years, as I mentioned, almost 5 million Afghans have been forced to return from refugee status and immigration status from Pakistan and Iran. I mean, those countries obviously feel like they had hosted Afghans for a long time, and now it's time for them to go back. But they're going back to a country that has no economy, basically, or has a very weak economy, no means of livelihood for millions. It could be an opportunity for Afghans to go back, let's say, to agriculture and maybe create a strong agricultural base. It could be an opportunity to maybe take advantage of some of the mineral wealth in a smaller scale, in smaller deals. But that all requires good governance. And one more thing, it requires a very strong commitment to anti-corruption. Corruption, at the end of the day, in some of these countries, especially in Afghanistan and others, at the end of the day, could be very corrosive. and can really hurt. And so initially the Taliban came into office fighting corruption, saying that their religious duty was to fight corruption and preventing from the same disease from taking over again, which really hurt the Republic. The Republic became extremely corrupt under the last few years of the Afghan ruling. So now what we are hearing is that we see that scourge reemerge again, unfortunately. And the hope is that they will not let it reemerge because it will hurt the country even more than already it is hurting.
Son of a...
What the hell was that, bro?
You okay?
Yeah, man. Oh, Magadichala. We should call Alex.
If you've been injured in a car accident, slip and fall, or work injury, reach out to Emergence Law today.
At Emergence Law, we maximize your compensation, you get constant client communication, and we win when it matters most. When you're involved in an accident, choosing the right attorney is the most important decision you can make. Let us show you why we're different at Emergence Law. With 11 attorneys on our team, we're able to go to trial and fight for your case. More important, the pedigree of our firm is customer service, so you always get a call, you always get an update. Lastly, we're results driven. We win. Let us show you how. Call us at 818-530-1300 or bestcaraccidentattorney.com.
Technology should move your business forward, not hold it back. At Titan Elite IT Services and Consulting, we make sure it does. Our clients don't wait days for help. They get real-time answers, fast resolutions, and dedicated support, both on-site and remote. From Los Angeles to Orange and Ventura counties, our coverage is local, statewide, and nationwide. When you need us, we're already on the way. We're not just an MSP. We build with you. From cloud migration to security to every endpoint in your network.
At Titan Elite, we don't just solve problems. We prevent them from happening. We become a part of your team and we grow with you.
Titan Elite IT Services and Consulting. Strategic, scalable, trusted, and always on.
I mean, look, corruption exists, I think, all around the world. Every government, every sector of politics. But what I've realized, the one common denominator, at least in my lifetime, the wars that I've been able to witness, even as a kid, right, was initially the Desert Storm, 91, I think it was. Yeah. Then we had the whole 9/11 issue. And then we've had now the Iran situation. It seems, at least in the last 35 or 40 years, the last 4 decades, that, like I said, I've personally we've witnessed the wars. The common denominator has been somehow an Islamic State. So do you think this is more of a religious war that's taking place out there, or is it just a coincidence that a lot of yes, we've had the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the war there, and then we've had the, Armenia against Azerbaijan, which again, that you could call it religious, or you could call it a war for land, right? A land grab. Yeah. It could go either way, because Armenians were ethnically cleansed essentially from Artsakh by the Azerbaijanis, right? So what's your perspective on that?
This whole issue of religion as a political tool, religion for political purposes, is a fairly new phenomena, even though in the past there have been times when religion played a role between different communities, living side by side. My experience is, so for the past 50 years, it has become more politicized. It has taken on different forms and different shades and different colors, different objectives, different agendas behind it, sometimes being manipulated, used for other purposes. And so people easily fall into that trap, especially in countries that are not educated enough, where education is lacking. So my view is that historically, if you really look, with few exceptions, in different parts of, let's say, the East, we're not going to talk about religion in the West, because religion in the West, like in Europe, has had, huge ups and downs. and resulted in the death of millions. Just focusing on the East, the Middle East, parts of Asia, where different religions have coexisted for centuries. I remember in Afghanistan where we are majority Sunni Muslim, minority Shia, where also minorities of Jews, maybe a few Christians that we didn't know existed, Hindus and Sikhs lived side by side with no issues at all, very few issues that you could point to. And they treated each other respectfully and had the same rights as all the others. In Iran, where the same thing occurred, where they lived next to each other. But then, yes, there were occasions where there were exceptions, where tensions flared up, something happened, injustice, one group doing something bad to another group, retaliation, and then it becomes a cycle of violence. So how to avoid these cycles of violence takes good leadership. It takes a broader view of issues and trying, I was trained as a diplomat. So for me, it's trying to look at solutions to problems. I prefer to resolve issues instead of letting them get out of hand, like we are seeing nowadays in our world, where so many issues can be resolved somewhat easily, maybe with some understanding of who you're dealing with and how to even talk to each other. It starts with communications. The three of us have been sitting here having a discussion and trying to understand each other. And I'm learning. You're hopefully learning. All your audience hopefully will be learning something. They don't have to take my word for what it is. I always tell people, do not consider me as an expert on Afghanistan or anything. Test me. If what I'm saying is correct, you have other ways to go and verify that. But I don't claim to know everything, or I don't claim to tell the truth or know the truth. But I will tell the truth, to know the truth. So if we have that kind of an approach, even in diplomacy and politics, which is something that we used to have, and we're losing it. And the more we lose it, the more emotional we become, the more somewhat abrasive, and then finally we become violent. Because we think it's either my way, my word, or nothing else matters, and I have to eliminate the other side. And so religion has that sort of tendency to become black and white. And what we need to do is to avoid the black and whites and to learn from those periods over centuries where Christians and Jews and Muslims and Sikhs and Hindus and Buddhists and others lived side by side. And we have good examples of that in our histories. And there were times when they didn't. And so those times where they didn't, we need to learn why, what caused it. Was it an internal issue? Or was it an external issue? Was it somebody else who did something to cause it? Or was it our sort of failure to manage it and understand it? That's how I look at it. And religion falls in that category. And religion can be extremely moving, right? Because it's faith-based. And in some religions, it's a question of life and death. And when it becomes a question of life and death, as it did with Afghanistan, when the Soviets invaded, for us, it was an atheist communist government that has come and is trying to impose its will by force on us. It became an issue of life and death.
Yeah, and that's what's happening in Iran right now. The Iranian people and the Iranian government is willing to die for their country. I mean, they're waiting for the United States or Israel to put boots on the ground.
They're waiting, yeah.
We've seen generals and certain high-ranking officials call the bluff of the United States and Israel, telling them that, you know what, come to Iran. We're waiting for you. Like, what do you say? What do you say to that? Because not to get too controversial with this, but throughout the years since 1948, since the State of Israel was created, there's been multiple wars that have been taking place where the United States has unfortunately been involved in it over and over. And when you have a prime minister like Netanyahu coming to Congress, sitting down in front of our senators and our congressmen, talking about Iraq being a threat to the Middle East, Afghanistan being a threat to the Middle East, Iran being a threat to the Middle East, and having the United States do its dirty work for them. And again, I know this is very controversial, but the light is shining on who the true problem is has become. And from what we're understanding, and you could correct me if I'm wrong or if we're wrong, but the state of Israel has become a major thorn in the Middle East at this point. Are they trying to create a greater Israel? They're going after Lebanon. They're going after Syria. They're going after Iraq. They're going after everybody. But for what? Is it because it was promised to them 3,000 years ago, or is it just a geopolitical grab?
These are the questions that are being raised every day in free societies where you can, and hopefully they will remain free, so you can raise questions and be able to seek answers. I'm very much involved on let's say X or Twitter, what you see with Twitter, and I read all this, and I think it's important that we be able to read the different views, that we be able to listen to the facts given, and that we decide what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, what's driving certain actions. And there are a lot of questions right now that are being raised in the United States. There are questions in Europe. Each country in Europe is trying to sort of do soul searching. And I think soul searching is good. I think that as long as you have that ability, that space to do soul searching, ask the right questions, seek the truth, then there's hope. As soon as you limit all of that, and you feel like you're not making progress, you're not able to seek truth, facts, and you can't figure out what the agendas are, or what the plays are, or what the politics behind things are, then you have a huge, I think, real problem on your hands. Any society, any country. So the questions that you raise nowadays exist in every society. In Afghanistan, we have a lot of existential questions, for example. Iran right now has existential questions. You pointed out to the fact that the Iranians are willing to sacrifice themselves for something that they consider as noble or worthy, or a calling, a religious calling, whatever it may be. They proved that in the Iraq-Iran war. I don't have the exact number, but more than 1.5 million Iranians stood against the Iraqi invasion, and they were able to stop it, even though Iraq was helped by many other countries at the time, in order to crush that revolution or that regime. It didn't work because of the fact that people sacrificed themselves in order to protect it, preserve it, whatever. Will they do it again? Are millions of Iranians willing to sacrifice themselves today? It's a big question. The record shows that they have done it. In Afghanistan, the record shows that Afghans did it as well.
But it's at what cost, though?
And they're willing to take the cost and take that blow, basically, in order to achieve their goal, whatever their goal may be. It could be very personal, a religious issue, duty, or it could be something more like nationalism, patriotism, whatever it is. So we live in that kind of a world still. Now, how is technology going to change all of this, my friends, is another question, another big question. You may want to bring some people who really know a lot about how the new technologies, AI-driven and others, monitoring systems, all of that is going to change the way people are deciding their fate. Is a big question that I don't have enough knowledge about, but it is a real question.
With the Strait of Hormuz constantly being opened and closed today, what are your thoughts about what the future holds for that? I guess you would call it a passage, because majority of oil and natural resources including in fact fertilizer as well. Which I mean, we chuckle when we talk about that being transferred or transported from the Strait of Hormuz. It's constantly been opened, closed, opened, closed, opened, closed. I feel like at this point it's become a game of chicken between the United States and Iran. What are your thoughts about who truly does have control over the Strait of Hormuz and what the future holds?
Yeah. Again, because of my training and my experience, I will point to international law. What does international law say that we have all agreed to? If we continue ignoring the legal frameworks that govern international order and world order and sort of bring us all to the table, around the same table, we are going to face again huge challenges down the road if we claim to sign to laws and then basically ignore them or violate them. I would have international legal experts look into that and tell us who has the right and who doesn't, and what are those rights, and how far does it go. Lots of this is clear. We just don't want, it's inconvenient for us to agree to it or to acknowledge it. So politics comes into play, power politics comes into play, ego politics comes into play, pride comes into play, transactionalism comes into play. What am I getting out of this? What am I not getting out of this? All of these things now come into play. But we cannot ignore the legal framework that we have all agreed to. We've signed these very important documents that say this is what constitutes your territorial, let's say, control over this passage.
Yes.
And this is where you are breaking the law, and this is where you're sticking to it, and everybody has to follow the same thing. We can't just pick and choose. We say human rights in this place, but not theirs. We say democracy in this place, but not here. I'm going to ignore it here, but I'm going to push for democracy over here. This double standard, in my opinion, is really going to not only tarnish the reputation of those who stand for those values and make them less trustworthy, but also is going to create more problems down the road because extremists of all kinds are going to take advantage of it.
What are the main reasons why we're in Iran? And everybody's been speaking about this is for years now, Iran is weeks away from creating enough, they're enriching enough uranium to create a nuclear weapon. Again, this has been spoken about in Congress for, I don't even know how long, since the early 2000s, if not the 90s. So does Iran have nuclear weapons? Or do they have enough uranium or enriched uranium to create a nuclear weapon? And for us to be now involved in the war with Iran, as they call it, it's not only affecting the world, but it's affecting the United States as well. A lot of people who voted in President Trump were hoping that we were going to get a 2016 Trump, an economy that was thriving, where jobs were being brought to the United States. Instead, it's become more of somewhat of a Dick Cheney type of President Trump, where we're involved in the Middle East again, where grocery prices are through the roof, gas prices are through the roof. Practically, the cost of living here is become unaffordable for a lot of people.
A lot of people losing jobs.
A lot of people, and unemployment. And listen, AI, when AI begins to become more and more advanced, that's going to be taking away a lot of jobs as well. So, as far as the nuclear weapons are concerned, do you think this was something where, it was some sort of excuse for the United States to be involved in Iran, just like it was an excuse for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Or do you think truly Iran is a dangerous state?
It's a very difficult question to answer because there are a lot of on one hand, emotions involved. There's a lot of politics involved. There's a lot of trust or lack of trust issues involved. And there's some amount of international law involved. This whole issue of who has the right to enrich uranium, who doesn't. How do you make sure that it's for civilian, non-military purposes versus military purposes, right? How do you monitor that? How are countries supposed to, meet certain obligations and be accountable? All of this has been discussed for decades. At one point, the international community, including the Americans and the Europeans and the Iranians, came to an understanding through the JCPOA. And that was to limit Iranian access to enriched uranium, the building of an atomic bomb, all of that, to have them under monitors. And then the trust issue came up. Is it real? Is it not real? To what extent is it mitigated? To be mitigated, and to what extent can it be controlled, managed? These are it becomes a very technical issue and a legalistic issue, both of them. So when you are dealing with legalistic and technical issues, you have to let experts deal with it. You have to let those who are professionals deal with it. If you let politicians have the last word, which usually is the case, they may vacillate. They may change their mind. They may be influenced by this side or that side, or this narrative or that narrative, this emotion or this trust or mistrust. You see what I'm saying? It becomes dangerous because you have to make sure that you rely on accurate technical data and experts telling you. So it's interesting that you mentioned this, because as we were driving this morning to come to this podcast, the latest news was that President Trump, is getting ready for maybe another attack on Iran. That the Iranians, through Pakistani mediation, have submitted a new proposal. This is just a few hours ago. Mm-hmm. So this is today on the 23rd as we're speaking. Yes. Things may change tomorrow, day after tomorrow, once you broadcast this. But in the Iranian proposal, what they have said is, listen, let's resolve the Strait of Hormuz issue, and then they gave some concessions, apparently, saying that there will not be tolling. So there will be no tolls from the Iranian side. If the Americans and others do this, this, and this, they will be doing this. So there was a give and take on the Strait of Hormuz access. On the nuclear uranium issue, they said, listen, we need a bit of time. Let's reconvene in 1 month. And at the same time, let's rely on experts to do the discussion. The Iranian people. This is what came out in the news this morning about the new Iranian proposal to President Trump, which is being discussed right this minute on the 23rd of May. 2026. Yes. for the sake of future generations.
It's roughly around 10:55 a.m. by the
way. And we haven't had enough coffee yet.
No, we haven't.
So whatever happens here on, I don't know. We'll see. But what I'm pointing to is how these things are handled and how they should, in my humble opinion, be handled. The more you rely on technical expertise, the more you rely on professionals, the more you rely on diplomats who know what they're talking about, who know the history, who know the context, and who understand better the dynamics involved geopolitically, geoeconomically, geostrategically, and all of that, and technically, then the better the chances of a good outcome for everyone. Because at the end of the day, what we want is a win-win, instead of a lose-lose or a lose-win, depending on who's going to win and who's going to lose. That's how I, again, look at things. In this issue of the Strait of Hormuz and the nuclear issue, I look at it from that perspective.
Do you think the United States should have ever been involved in the Middle East as far as with Iran?
Well, you cannot be not involved in any part of the world, the Middle East especially, because the Middle East has been for the past decades, since World War II, even before, but since World War II has been such a um, hornet's nest, and it has been
since oil has been discovered.
Since
oil has been discovered.
And then oil didn't help to that extent.
No, not at all.
Oil has been a factor at play. But there's more to it, right? The Middle East, as again, we go back to religion. The Middle East is a very poignant place because of emotions, faith involved, and the fact that we want to live peacefully, all of us together, and not have to deal with the carnage and the killing and the animosity that it has created, and the mistrust. So how do we change that paradigm, I think, is a big question of our time, for the sake of not just these generations, but future generations as well. Our children shouldn't have to deal with these issues if we can't resolve them because of our egos or because of profiteering or because of sense of entitlement or whatever it is.
Yeah, but when you I'm glad you brought up the topic of generation. You look what happened in Gaza, for example, right? You had hundreds of thousands of people killed on the Gaza Strip. Many of them displaced. Homes have been leveled. How do you tell those children to not seek revenge for the killing of their mother, the killing of their father, the killing of their brother, their uncle? I mean, you're talking about a cycle that's never ending at this point, because those kids are now going to be growing up as orphans, or a father who loses a son is going to want to seek revenge for their child's loss. It's a never ending cycle, and I understand your point as far as letting the professionals handle it and having peace, but when does it end?
Right. If you're involved in a cycle of violence where we lose sight of what's just, what's right, what's God-given, life is God-given, is my belief. I think it's the belief of many of us. And if then you have to take responsibility for the consequences of your actions. And I come from a country where generations were affected. I was 17 years old when the first shots were fired, and my high school happened to be right next to the presidential palace, so we were the first ones to hear it and feel it. And I've seen generations being affected, impacted by war and by violence of all kinds. Domestic, internal, and external.
Foreign, yeah.
And I've seen that sense of revenge in people's eyes, and it still exists. It's a miracle that we haven't, in Afghanistan, taken as much revenge as some people expected after all these years of cycles of violence. But I think that feelings exist in people. So time is important. We need to use time as a healer. And how do you heal is the other question. Can you heal? And if you can, how? And how do you heal in a way that stops the cycle or prevents it from becoming more intense? And as I have to say, our leaderships across the board, with few exceptions, have failed in preventing such tragedies from occurring. Now, we can start another chapter on why it is, what's driving, how does history look at this, what are the drivers today in today's world. It's a never-ending discussion.
I think with our involvement in the Middle East, even in Europe with Ukraine and Russia, where we're billions of dollars was sent over for nonsense, for war. I think the United States and our government officials that we elect, that they serve us at the end of the day, need to take a couple of steps back and analyze what's truly going on here. Because in the United States, there's a massive drug problem, there's a housing problem, there's a homeless crisis, a mental health problem, and for us to take all that money, billions and billions of dollars, and send it overseas for others to kill each other, it's like the cancer is in our country itself. I think maybe we should remove that tumor before we spend money overseas.
So it's a question of prioritization, right?
Well, there is
How
no
do you
prioritization
prioritize?
right now.
Yes. Where do you start? What's more important today to this country? Each country's priorities are different. What is more important today in the United States for the American people in general? And how do you shift resources to solve those problems? How do you use resources? And here's where the Congress of the United States comes into play, because they are the ones who are basically holding the purse, and they're the ones who decide on allocations of money. The government demands or spends, but the rest is in the hands of Congress. So they are the representatives of the people, of the citizens. They're supposed to represent the interests and the needs and the wants of the population. So that's the way the system is set up.
System's broken.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
But the system's broken.
So is the system working the way it should?
No. Clearly it's not.
So, I mean, that's an issue for all Americans to think about, talk about, as you are, as we are here, and to try to then take the next steps. See, in my opinion, from my experience, it doesn't help to just think about it, talk about it, or write about it. I think it takes a bit more to bring about change, reform, and to correct the course. So if we are on the wrong course, how do you correct it? What does the system allow you to do to correct it? And what happens if you don't? Somebody needs to also ask that question, because people need to understand what the consequences could be of inaction, and what kind of action actually yields some kind of result. So it's complicated, but exactly where I think society stands right now. And I think that the fact that social media allows for people to be more expressive is good, but then social media can also be manipulated. Any media can be manipulated, not just social. Any media can be manipulated.
Especially with AI being integrated at the end today.
So we see that risk as well now emerge.
Yeah, I was speaking to someone yesterday whose husband is in the military, and she mentioned, she's like, they've been having trouble with recruitment, and they're not getting anywhere near as much recruits as they used to, 5, 10, 15 years ago. And that's one of the things that came up. I said, I think part of the reason is that there was always corruption. There was always political divide. It's nothing new. It's just, it's in our face due to social media and the internet. So we're exposed to it day in and day out. And then our algorithms are designed a specific way to deliberately divide us, right? Because if you go on my phone versus somebody else's phone and another person, based on their algorithm, it's all going to be pushing their mindset a certain direction. And so what's happening is that the whole morale of the country of, why do I need to go jeopardize and risk my life for this country when most of the wars we fought has nothing to do with our own people, right? So the military, I don't blame them. I don't blame young kids for not wanting to, not being encouraged and motivated to go into the military, because who am I fighting for? What am I mean, if the fight was for our own country, our own people here, look, we're Armenian, right? We were born in Armenia, but we identify as Americans because we spend most of our lives here. Our kids are born here. So we're Armenian Americans, but at the end of the day, and we've talked about this many times, if God forbid there was a world war, who would we fight for? We're fighting for the United States because this is where our families live. So we're protecting our family, our country. But and that's the only time, like, I personally would consider even going into the front lines is, yes, I'm defending my country. But at this point, it's like, who are we defending? What are we fighting for? So the whole morale just around the world, but especially in the United States, I think people there's no identity. We don't have that identity anymore. The divide is just, we need that. That's why we need reform, is to bring back that unity. I mean, it's called the United States of America for a reason, right? Because it comes from uniting people from around the world, bringing them into the most amazing country in the world. That's why we're all here.
Yeah.
And yet it sometimes feels like the sacrifices our parents made to migrate into this country, to immigrate here, have all the reasons they came here for. A lot of it doesn't exist anymore, which is tragic, because our kids, if this continues, our kids are not going to have the opportunities that we had. They're not going to live the life that we had. They're going to have access to a lot more nonsense, like, social media and AI and all this other stuff that could potentially, quote unquote, simplify their life, but it's going to complicate everything else for them, I think.
Absolutely. And education is so important. And for our kids, as you said, we need to be focused on the next generations. Not only that they would inherit a healthy economy, but also that they would be educated in a way that would make them think coherently. Because the more these technologies take over, nowadays, some of the studies show that they're doing the thinking for us now. That we are not using our own brain power anymore, or as much as we should, and that our kids are susceptible to thinking less and using their gray matter less because of reliance on technologies and AI doing the thinking. So we need to rethink this whole issue of how to make sure that our kids can think and be lucid and understand the differences and not have to depend so much on somebody else doing the thinking.
Yes.
That is a very, very sensitive issue and a question that needs to be raised, I think. And then it applies to international relations. It applies to foreign affairs. It applies to which war do you go to, which war don't you go to. All of this is, at the end of the day, interrelated.
It's ironic how the most complex system that God created, which is our brain, which, according to science, we utilize a very small amount of.
Small amount, yes.
That small amount is, as you said, being taken away from us.
It's going to be even smaller.
Right.
It's going to be even smaller. It's crazy how quickly AI is establishing itself into our minds, because what you just mentioned, we're beginning to use less and less of it. We're depending on it more and more. And people need to start catching themselves and allow themselves to write those text messages, write those emails, write those letters.
Come on, man. Don't take me back to that. The archaic, I actually have to write my own email.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, man. It's insane. Now again, they're making it very easy for you, and they're presenting it in such a beautiful package where it's like, it'll save you 5, 10, 15 minutes instead of you writing that email. Just put in the bullet points and it'll do the job for you. But it's like, okay, if it continues to do the job for me, what's next?
Seriously, it's going to become a problem. We all have to resist the temptation.
But the problem is right now, it's affecting the children.
Yes.
And by children, I mean anywhere from middle school to high school.
Yes.
So,
and college.
Wait till it evolves to the point where it's going to be like, hey, you don't want to spend time with your kids? I know they could be a handful, right? Don't worry about it. Just Let the AI robot know what you do with your kids, and he'll do it for you. Just go out there and do your thing.
Yeah.
And next thing you
When
know,
the teacher is going to become a robot,
yeah,
that's already a step towards that.
Yeah, that's the scary portion of it. Because look, when cell phones came out and the iPhones and the Samsungs, for a lot of our parents and the older generation, it was very foreign to them. For a lot of the younger kids, it became so easy to use. You were like, oh my God, this is great. This is going to make it so much easier to communicate and do this and text messages and photos. Now, I think we're kind of falling into that realm of where our parents and our elders were with AI and the technology being released so quickly that you look at a lot of the younger kids and the way they're integrating AI into their life. I kind of look at some of the stuff and I go, well, how did you do that? How did you do that again? And can you show me that? And is there an easier way to do this? And you kind of take a couple steps back and you say, all right, so are we headed in a direction where our kids' brains are going to be used less and less and less, and they're going to rely on this more? For example, Meta glasses now, the new version of them that's going to be released, has a, I guess you would call it a screen on the glasses where it'll tell you what's here, what's there, and if a person is speaking to you in a different language, it'll translate for you. And again, these are all phenomenal things.
You don't need to learn another language anymore. You don't, even though we know what the benefits of learning a language
Exactly. That's where I was going with this.
Yes.
Where it was kind of like the more languages you know, I mean, that was a big flex. It was kind of like, oh my God, how many languages do you speak again? They talk about, they make fun of Melania Trump and her accent when she speaks English, but how many languages did she speak again?
Five or six
or seven languages, where you're just like, you know what, that's impressive. Now it's kind of like, listen, well, you don't need to learn the language. Don't worry about the language. It'll translate it for you.
I grew up with learning 4 or 5 languages at the same time, actually. And I have encouraged my children, my 2 sons, who are now 18 and 20, and they have been exposed to French, for example, all their life, and to some extent, Dari, Farsi, as we say in Afghanistan. And I see how important that is for them, not only from a sort of gray matter perspective, but also personality, worldliness, knowledge, culture, all of those things are impacted. So in anybody's child, it falls into that category. So I agree with you. We need to rethink some of this and realize that there's some good, but there are also some bad.
One of my father's regrets was not teaching me Farsi or any of my brother's Farsi. My parents would use Farsi as a secret language. Anytime they didn't want us to know something,
you don't need to know.
You don't need to know. But look, at the end of the day, there were certain words that we did catch on to, but that was the secret language. And as time went on, when I began to do some work with him and business with him, a lot of his clientele and a lot of his business partners were Iranian, and he would speak Farsi with them. And as time went on, and now at the time I was in like my mid to late 20s, he would be like, "Oh man, you should have learned the language."
Yes, because there's a time frame within which it's easier. The sooner you start, and the longer you continue, the better it is. So that's the sort of secret to language. Yeah.
So how many languages do you speak? You speak Farsi, obviously. You said
I speak some English. I learned my English at the French school, so French is my first foreign language, and I speak Dari, which is a version of Farsi, and I understand Pashto, which is the other language to a large extent. I'm not very fluent in it, so I am hesitant, and I, believe it or not, studied 4 years of Russian at a French school in England as a foreign language. So I can read some Russian. I understand some words. I unfortunately wasn't able to pursue that and practice it as much as I should have.
But Afghan language, you said it was Dari.
Yeah, Dari and
Dari.
Pashto. Yeah,
But Farsi and Dari are very similar to each other, right?
Absolutely,
They can
yeah.
understand each other when they speak, right?
99%, 98%.
It's like Western and Eastern Armenian.
Yeah, it's English in Australia and English in the US. Let's say
It's Texas English against
Texas English.
California English. Is there anything else that we missed that you would like to cover?
We've covered quite a bit. I think that I appreciate what you're doing. I think these types of platforms and these types of discussions are absolutely necessary for the wider audience and people who follow you and people who may come into contact with you. I want to thank you and wish you well in what you're doing. Hopefully, down the road, after the Strait of Hormuz issue is resolved, we can regroup.
I'm really curious to go see the Strait of Hormuz.
It doesn't exist.
There's no tour guides. You can't.
There you go. And then look forward to having another chat later on sometime.
Definitely.
And wish you a good journey with this program.
We appreciate it. I think this is the most important thing is we've talked about this several times. You have all these news outlets, the Foxes, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, where a lot of it is scripted. Yeah. And off air we kind of talked about it, where you were saying, how long does it go for?
Right.
And we said, you know what, it goes on for as long as it needs to go on for.
Yes.
And when you sit down with individuals, whether they're from the United States, they're from Afghanistan, they're from England, they're from Australia, it doesn't matter. You take a lot from it. And we're hoping we took a lot away from it, but we're hoping that people that listen to it take away something from it as well, understanding, the history of Afghanistan.
Yes.
And what really happened there, and who the people are compared to what the MSNBCs, the Foxes, and the CNNs
or
have.
the false narratives that exist.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We need to debunk those false narratives. It's very important, and you guys are doing a great job with that.
We appreciate it. Omar, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate you, sir.
Appreciate you, sir. Have a safe flight back. Everybody else, shout out to Hamid and Omar as well for making this happen. Thank you, gentlemen. Everybody else, today's episode will be up and running on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major platforms mañana. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. We'll see you guys all next week.